You know that moment when your entire life changes in an instant? When fate reaches out and grabs you by the collar, spinning everything you thought you knew upside down? Mine happened on a dusty highway in rural Montana, with nothing but my backpack, broken dreams, and a sheriff's truck that pulled over just when I'd given up hope. My name is Jamie Collins, and this is the story of how I went from running away from my past to running straight into my future. One that looked nothing like I'd imagined, but everything like I'd secretly hoped for. The sun beat down mercilessly on Highway 89, turning the asphalt into shimmering waves of heat. I'd been walking for 3 hours, my thumb stuck out toward every passing vehicle, though few bothered to slow down. Most people see a 24-year-old guy with a backpack and immediately think, trouble. They weren't entirely wrong. I was trouble, or at least I'd left plenty of it behind in Seattle. A failed relationship with Marcus that had imploded spectacularly. It's a graphic design job that had evaporated when the startup folded, in an apartment I could no longer afford. Sometimes life doesn't just hand you lemons. It dumps the entire citrus grove on your head and sets it on fire. So I did what any reasonable person in crisis mode does. I bought a bus ticket to somewhere, anywhere else. The bus had broken down in a town so small it didn't even have a Starbucks. Just a gas station, a diner that looked like it hadn't been updated since 1987, and a whole lot of nothing stretching in every direction, which is how I ended up hitchhiking. Despite knowing every horror story that starts exactly this way, my phone had died an hour ago. My water bottle was empty, and I was seriously considering whether dying of exposure in Montana was really worse than going back to Seattle and facing the wreckage of my life. That's when I heard the engine. I turned, squinting against the sun, and felt my stomach drop. Not just any vehicle, a sheriff's truck, white with green stripes and an official seal on the door. My first instinct was to run, even though I hadn't actually done anything illegal. There's just something about law enforcement that makes you question every decision you've ever made. The truck slowed, pulling onto the shoulder about 20 feet ahead of me. Dust billowed around the tires as it came to a stop. Great, I thought. This is it. I'm going to get arrested for existing while queer in the middle of nowhere. The driver's door opened, and I got my first look at Sheriff Daniel Reeves. He was tall, easily 6'2", with broad shoulders that filled out his tan uniform in a way that should probably be illegal. Dark hair, slightly longer than you'd expect for law enforcement, touched with just enough gray at the temples to suggest he was in his mid-30s. But it was his face that caught me off guard. Strong jaw, kind eyes, the color of aged whiskey. And a slight smile that seemed genuinely concerned rather than suspicious. "You look like you could use some help," he called out, his voice carrying a warm, rough quality like honey mixed with gravel. I hesitated, every self-preservation instinct screaming at me. But what choice did I have? Die of heat stroke? Or accept help from a impossibly handsome small-town sheriff who probably had very traditional views about people like me? "I'm okay," I lied, my voice coming out hoarse and unconvincing. He raised an eyebrow, clearly not buying it. "Son, you're 3 miles from the nearest town in 90-degree heat with no water. That's pretty much the definition of not okay." He paused, then added more gently, "I'm not here to hassle you, just offering a ride." Something in his tone made me trust him, or maybe it was the dehydration talking. Either way, I found myself walking toward the truck. "Where are you headed?" he asked as I approached. "Honestly, I have no idea, just ... away." He studied me for a moment, and I saw understanding flicker in those warm eyes. "Been there," he said simply. "We'll figure it out." I climbed into the passenger seat, and the blast of air conditioning felt like salvation. He reached behind the seat and pulled out a cold water bottle, handing it to me without comment. I nearly cried with relief as I drank. "I'm Daniel," he said, pulling back onto the highway. "Daniel Reeves. Sheriff of Red Creek County, though I promise that's not as impressive as it sounds. A population of about 2,000, and the most exciting thing that happens is when Mrs. Henderson's cat gets stuck in a tree." Despite everything, I smiled. Jamie Collins. And right now, boring sounds pretty good. running from something or towards something. The question was casual, but I sensed genuine interest behind it. Both. Neither. I don't know. I stared out the window at the endless landscape. I just needed to get away from Seattle. Things fell apart pretty spectacularly. Job. That too. Ah, he nodded knowingly. The complete life implosion. Yeah, I definitely know that feeling. I glanced at him, surprised. He didn't seem like the type to have his life fall apart. He seemed solid, steady, like the kind of person who had everything figured out. Divorced, he explained, reading my expression. Well, sort of. My marriage ended about 3 years ago. Turned out my ex-wife wanted a husband who actually wanted to be married to a woman. He said it matter-of-factly, without bitterness, and my heart stuttered in my chest. Wait, was he saying what I thought he was saying? I'm gay, he continued, as if discussing the weather. Took me until I was 32 to figure it out, or rather, to finally admit it to myself. Small-town sheriff coming out wasn't exactly in my life plan, but here we are. I stared at him, completely speechless. Of all the scenarios I'd imagined when that sheriff's truck pulled over, this wasn't even on the list. You okay there, Jamie? He glanced at me with an amused smile. You look like you've seen a ghost. I didn't expect. I struggled to form coherent words. You're a sheriff in Montana. And you're openly gay? Life's full of surprises. His smile widened. And yes, before you ask, it was complicated at first. But this is a good town with good people. They care more about whether you do your job well than who you love. Most of them, anyway. We drove in comfortable silence for a few minutes while I processed this information. The landscape rolled past. Golden fields, distant mountains, endless sky. It was beautiful in a stark, lonely way that matched how I'd been feeling for months. So what's your plan? Daniel asked eventually. Got a destination in mind? Not really. I was going to take a bus to Wyoming, maybe find work there. But the bus broke down, and now I'm just improvising. He was quiet for a moment, and I could see him thinking. Red Creek is about 20 minutes up the road. It's not much, definitely not Seattle, but we've got a small motel, a few restaurants, some shops. There's a design firm in town that might be hiring. Owner's always complaining about needing help with graphics and marketing stuff. Why are you helping me? The question came out more vulnerable than I intended. Daniel looked at me then. Really looked at me, and something passed between us. An understanding, a recognition. A spark of something I wasn't ready to name yet. Because 3 years ago, I was in a similar place. Lost, scared, not sure where I belonged, or if there was even a place for me anymore. Someone helped me then, gave me a chance to figure things out. Maybe I'm just paying it forward, he paused. Or maybe I just don't like seeing someone struggle when I can help. The sincerity in his voice made my throat tight. I'd spent so long in Seattle feeling invisible, feeling like just another face in the crowd, another casualty of life's randomness. And here was this man, this unexpectedly kind, unexpectedly queer small-town sheriff, seeing me, really seeing me, and offering help without expecting anything in return. Thank you, I managed to say. Seriously, you have no idea how much this means. I think I have some idea. He smiled, and God, that smile did things to me. Dangerous things. The kind of things that made me forget I was a complete disaster who had no business being attracted to anyone. Especially not the local sheriff who was literally rescuing me from the side of the road as we drove into Red Creek. I caught my first glimpse of what would become my new home, at least temporarily. Main Street looked like something out of a postcard. Brick buildings with awnings, flower boxes on windowsills, a courthouse with a clock tower, people walking dogs and chatting on corners. It was quintessentially small-town America. And normally that would have sent me running in the opposite direction, but something about it felt different. Maybe it was the rainbow flag I spotted hanging in a coffee shop window. Maybe it was the way Daniel waved at people as we passed, and they waved back with genuine warmth. Or maybe it was just that I was too tired to run anymore. Daniel pulled up in front of a modest motel called the Ponderosa Inn. Wanda, who runs this place, is good people. Tell her I sent you, and she'll give you a fair rate. There's a diner next door with decent food, and tomorrow I can introduce you to Chuck at the design firm. I turned to him, overwhelmed by his kindness. I don't know how to repay you. Don't worry about it. Just focus on getting back on your feet. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a business card. My cell number's on there. If you need anything, and I mean anything, call me, okay? Our fingers brushed as I took the card, and I felt electricity shoot up my arm. From the way his eyes widened slightly, I knew he felt it too. Okay, I whispered. He held my gaze for a long moment, something unspoken hanging in the air between us. Then he cleared his throat and looked away, a faint blush coloring his cheeks. Welcome to Red Creek, Jamie Collins, he said softly. Something tells me this is going to be interesting. As I watched him drive away, card clutched in my hand. I couldn't shake the feeling that my life had just changed direction in a way I never saw coming. And for the first time in months, I felt something other than despair. I felt hope. The Ponderosa Inn was exactly what you'd expect from a small-town motel. Clean but dated, with floral bedspreads and landscape paintings that probably came with the building. Wanda, the owner, was a cheerful woman in her 60s who indeed gave me a discount when I mentioned Daniel's name. Though the knowing twinkle in her eye made me wonder what exactly she was thinking, I spent that first night lying awake, staring at the ceiling, replaying the day's events. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Daniel's face, those warm, whiskey eyes, that genuine smile. The way his whole expression softened when he talked about paying kindness forward. Stop it, I told myself. The last thing you need is to develop feelings for someone, especially someone who's clearly just being nice. But my heart, it seemed, had different plans. The next morning, Daniel showed up at the diner where I was nursing a coffee and trying to make a short stack of pancakes last as long as possible. He slid into the booth across from me wearing civilian clothes this time, jeans and a dark blue Henley that made his eyes even more striking. Morning, he said, with that smile that was quickly becoming dangerously familiar. Ready to meet Chuck? You didn't have to come personally. You could have just given me directions. I could have, he agreed. But where's the fun in that? The design firm, Elevation Creative, occupied a renovated space above the hardware store. Chuck Brennan turned out to be a 50-something gay man, with silver hair, bright eyes, and an energy that immediately put me at ease. Any friend of Daniel's is worth talking to, Chuck said, shaking my hand firmly. Let's see your portfolio. I pulled out my laptop, praying the battery would hold, and showed him my work. I scrolled through my designs. I snuck glances at Daniel, who was leaning against the wall, watching with what looked like pride, though that was probably wishful thinking. You're good, Chuck said finally. Really good. It's got 3 local businesses that need complete branding overhauls, plus ongoing work for the county tourism board. When can you start? I blinked. Just like that? Just like that? Unless you need time to think about it? No, I said quickly. No, I can start whenever you need me, Chuck grinned. How about Monday? That gives you the weekend to settle in. We'll work out details about PE and everything else then. As we left, I felt like I was floating. A job. An actual job, doing what? I loved, in a town that was starting to feel less terrifying and more like possibility. Thank you, I said to Daniel as we reached his truck. Seriously, I don't know what I would have done if you hadn't stopped yesterday. You would have figured something out. You seem like the type who always does. He paused, looking uncertain for the first time since I'd met him. Listen, I know you just got here and probably want time to yourself, but there's a community cookout tonight at the park. Bunch of folks from town, nothing fancy. Would you want to come? Might be a good way to meet people. My first instinct was to say no. Large gatherings of strangers weren't exactly my comfort zone, especially after months of isolating myself in Seattle. But something about the hopeful look in Daniel's eyes made me reconsider. Will you be there? I asked. Yeah, I'll be there. Then, okay, I'll come. His smile could have powered the entire town. That evening, I discovered that Red Creek's idea of a community cookout was equal parts potluck, social gathering, and small-town gossip exchange. Picnic tables dotted the park. Kids ran around playing tag, and the smell of grilled meat mixed with the sweet scent of pine trees. Daniel found me almost immediately, introducing me to what felt like half the town. There was Luis and his husband Marcus. I felt a pang at the name, but pushed it aside. Who owned the hardware store. Jenny and Sarah, a lesbian couple who ran the coffee shop with the rainbow flag. The mayor Tom, who shook my hand warmly and welcomed me to Red Creek without a hint of judgment. "Told you it was a good town, Daniel," said softly as we loaded paper plates with food. "I'm starting to see that." We found a spot at a quieter table, slightly apart from the main crowd. The sun was beginning to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink that seemed impossible, like something out of a painting. "Can I ask you something?" I said, gathering my courage. "Anything? What made you finally come out?" "I mean, you said you were 32. That must have been scary." Daniel was quiet for a moment, his expression thoughtful. "It was terrifying," he admitted. "I'd spent my whole life trying to be what everyone expected. Star athlete in high school, military service, married a wonderful woman who deserved someone who could love her the way she deserved. I kept thinking if I just tried hard enough, if I just committed fully to the life I was supposed to want, the truth would go away. But it didn't. But it didn't," he echoed. "Eventually, I realized I was making everyone miserable, myself, my wife, everyone. The person who finally pushed me to be honest was my ex-wife, actually. She knew before I admitted it, told me she loved me enough to let me go so I could find out who I really was. She sounds incredible. She is. We're still friends. She remarried last year to a guy who's actually attracted to her, and I was happy for them." He smiled, but there was old pain behind it. Coming out in a small town as the sheriff, I won't lie. Some people had problems with it. Lost a few friends, but I gained a lot more. I gained myself, which was worth everything else. I felt tears prick my eyes. I came out when I was 19. My parents were not supportive. We haven't spoken in 3 years. Daniel reached across the table and took my hand. The touch was electric, comforting and exciting all at once. "I'm sorry. What's their loss? For what it's worth. But it's also their failure, not yours. Sometimes it's hard to remember that." "I know." His thumb traced circles on the back of my hand, and I wondered if he realized he was doing it. "Fresh start. New chapter. New chapter. Maybe this is where your story gets better." "Maybe," I whispered, looking into his eyes and seeing something there that made my heart race. The moment stretched between us, loaded with possibility, until a group of kids ran past, breaking the spell. Daniel pulled his hand back, looking almost embarrassed, and I immediately missed his touch. We stayed at the cookout until the stars came out, talking about everything and nothing. He told me about growing up in Red Creek, his time in the Army, cases he handled as sheriff, mostly mundane stuff, with the occasional excitement. I told him about my design work, my love of hiking, the tiny apartment in Seattle that I'd actually loved despite everything else falling apart. It felt natural, easy, like we'd known each other for years instead of barely 2 days. When he drove me back to the motel, I didn't want the night to end. "Can I see you tomorrow?" he asked, and there was something vulnerable in the question that made my breath catch. "I'd like that. There's a trail up to Eagle Point. Great views, not too difficult. If you're interested, I'm interested." In so many things, I didn't add. He smiled, and in the dim light of the motel parking lot, he looked almost ethereal. "Pick you up at 9? It's a date. Out." The word slipped out before I could stop it, and I immediately felt my face heat. "I mean, not a date, just a figure of speech. I didn't mean to, Jamie." He stopped my rambling with a gentle laugh. "It can be a date if you want it to be." My heart stopped. "Do you want it to be?" "Yeah," he said softly. "I really do." I couldn't breathe, couldn't think, could only stare at this incredible manhood. Appeared in my life like some kind of miracle, and was now looking at me like I was something precious. "Okay," I managed. "Then it's a date." He reached out and tucked a strand of hair behind my ear, his fingers lingering against my cheek. "Get some sleep, Jamie Collins. Tomorrow's going to be a good day." I watched him drive away, my cheeks still, tingling from his touch, and knew with absolute certainty that I was falling for him. Fast, hard, completely, And for once in my life, instead of being terrified by that realization, I felt excited. The hike to Eagle Point was everything Daniel promised. Challenging enough to be interesting, with views that took what little breath I had left. We talked the whole way, pausing occasionally to point out wildlife or particularly stunning vistas. At the summit, we sat on a flat rock overlooking the valley, sharing water and trail mix, and I realized I'd never felt more content. "Glad you stopped," I said quietly. "That day on the highway." "Me too." He turned to look at me, and the intensity in his gaze made my pulse quicken. "Can I be honest about something?" "Always." "I saw you walking long before I actually stopped."
Actually, you definitely drove past you.
"What made you turn around?" "I couldn't get your face out of my head. You looked so lost, but also so determined. And there was something about you." He trailed off, shaking his head. "This is going to sound crazy. Try me." I felt like if I didn't stop, if I just kept driving, I'd be missing something important. Someone important. He met my eyes. Turns out I was right. Couldn't help myself. I leaned in, closing the distance between us, giving him every opportunity to pull back. He did. Our lips met softly. Tentatively, a question and an answer all at once. His hand came up to cup my face, gentle and sure, and I felt something inside me click into place. Like I'd been lost my whole life and finally found my way home. When we pulled apart, he was smiling. "I've wanted to do that since yesterday. Why didn't you?" "Didn't want to take advantage? You've been through a lot, and I didn't want you to think I had ulterior motives for helping you, and now I'm hoping you can see that I helped you because it was the right thing to do. And I'm kissing you because I can't seem to help myself." I laughed, feeling lighter than I had in months. "Good, because I can't seem to help myself either." We kissed again, longer this time, deeper, until we were both breathless and grinning like idiots. "So what happens now?" I asked. "Now." He stood, pulling me to my feet. "Now we take things one day at a time. You settle into your new job, figure out if Red Creek is where you want to be, and I do my best to convince you to stick around." "I think you're doing a pretty good job of that already." Us. As we hiked back down, hands occasionally brushing until he finally just took mine and held it, I thought about how strange life was. 2 days ago, I'd been at my lowest point, convinced my story was over. Now, I was beginning to realize it was just starting. The next few weeks passed in a blur of new routines and unexpected joy. I threw myself into work at Elevation Creative, discovering that Chuck was not only talented, but also an incredible mentor. The projects challenged me in ways I'd forgotten I enjoyed, pushing my creativity while giving me the freedom to experiment, but the real revelation was Daniel. We fell into an easy pattern. Coffee before work, lunch when his schedule allowed, dinners at various local spots where everyone seemed delighted by our developing relationship. He showed me hidden corners of Red Creek, the swimming hole where kids went in summer, the vintage bookstore run by an elderly gay couple who'd been together for 40 years, the lookout point where you could see 3 counties on a clear day. And through it all, we talked, really talked, about his struggles accepting himself, about my fractured relationship with my family, about dreams and fears and the 1,000 tiny things that make up a life. We also kissed. A lot. Against his truck, in quiet corners of hiking trails, on my motel room doorstep like teenagers afraid to take things further too fast. Because despite the obvious chemistry between us, we were both cautious. He was the first person I'd been interested in since Marcus, and I could tell he was being careful with me, not wanting to push too hard or too fast. And I was grateful for that patience, even as my body screamed for more. 3 weeks after we met, Daniel invited me to his place for dinner. He lived in a small ranch house on the edge of town, surrounded by pine trees and mountain views. It was distinctly masculine, but cozy, leather furniture, landscape photography on the walls, a bookshelf full of mysteries and westerns. "I should warn you," he said as he worked in the kitchen, "I'm not an amazing cook, but I make a decent steak. After weeks of diner food and my own sad attempts at cooking in a motel microwave, I'm sure it'll be incredible." He laughed, and I loved that I could make him do that. Make him smile. make him laugh, make him look at me with heat in those whiskey-colored eyes. We ate dinner on his back deck, watching the sunset paint the mountains in impossible colors. The conversation flowed easily, as always. But there was a tension underlying it now. Anticipation. Want. The acknowledgement that we'd been dancing around something for weeks. "I need to tell you something," Daniel said as we cleared the dishes. My stomach clenched. Here it came, the revelation that this was all too fast, too complicated, too something. "Okay," I said carefully. He took my hand, leading me to the living room couch. "I really like you, Jamie, more than I expected to, honestly. And I know we've only known each other a few weeks, but—" He paused, seeming to gather his courage. "I want to see where this goes. For real. Not just casual dating, but actually building something together. If that's what you want to." Relief and joy flooded through me. "That's what I want. God, yes, that's what I want. Yeah." His smile was brilliant. "Yeah." I moved closer until our knees touched. "I was falling for you before I even got out of your truck that first day. I've just been trying not to rush things because I didn't want to mess this up." "You couldn't mess this up." He cupped my face in his hands. "You showing up on that highway was the best thing that's happened to me in years. I was literally at rock bottom. And now you're here, with me, starting over, building something new." His thumb traced my lower lip. "That's pretty amazing if you ask me." I closed the distance between us, kissing him deeply, and felt his sharp intake of breath. His hands moved to my waist, pulling me closer, and I went willingly, ending up straddling his lap as the kiss deepened into something urgent and needy. "Jamie," he breathed against my lips. "Tell me to stop if you want to slow down." "I don't want to slow down." I pulled back enough to meet his eyes. "I want you. All of you. If you want me to. If." He laughed roughly. "I've wanted you since I first saw you on that highway. Stubborn and beautiful and completely lost. I want you so much it scares me. Don't be scared." I kissed him again, softer this time. "I'm not going anywhere." He stood, lifting me with him easily, and I wrapped my legs around his waist as he carried me to the bedroom. What followed was tender and intense, gentle and passionate, everything I'd hoped for and more. He touched me like I was precious, like I was something to be savored, and I gave myself to him completely, holding nothing back. Afterwards, lying tangled in his sheets with his arm around me and my head on his chest, I felt something settle deep in my soul. This was it. This was what I'd been missing, what I'd been searching for without knowing it. "Stay," he whispered into my hair. "Tonight. Always." I lifted my head to look at him. "Daniel, ... I know it's fast. I know we should probably take more time. But Jamie, I don't want to waste another second pretending I don't want this. Want you in my life permanently." He traced my cheekbone with gentle fingers. "Move in with me. Or don't, if it's too soon. But no, that's where my heart is. All in. Completely." Tears blurred my vision. I lost everything in Seattle. My relationship, my job, my home. I thought I was running away from one life and would have to spend years building another one. But I was actually running toward this. Toward you. Toward home. Is that a yes? That's a yes. I kissed him, tasting salt from my own tears and his smile. Yes to all of it. Yes to you. 6 months later, I stood in Daniel's kitchen, our kitchen, making coffee and watching the sun rise over the mountains. My design portfolio was spread across the dining table from a late night working on a major campaign for the tourism board. Daniel's sheriff's hat hung on the hook by the door. Our lives had merged so seamlessly, it was hard to remember when they'd been separate. Red. Creek had become home in ways I'd never imagined possible. Chuck had made me a full partner in Elevation Creative. I'd reconnected with a few old friends from Seattle and made peace with the life I'd left behind. Even my relationship with my parents was slowly, tentatively healing after I'd sent them a letter explaining where I was and why. But the biggest change was internal. I'd stopped running from my past, from intimacy, from the possibility of being hurt again, because what Daniel and I had built together was worth the risk, worth everything. Morning, Beautiful, his voice rumbled behind me, and strong arms wrapped around my waist. I leaned back against him, feeling his warmth, his solidity, his love. Mourning yourself. Big day today, he murmured, pressing a kiss to my neck. Today was the anniversary of the day we met. 6 months since he'd stopped his truck on that dusty highway and changed my life forever. We were having a small party at the house with friends. Nothing elaborate, just the community that had welcomed me with open arms. You know what I was thinking about? I turned in his arms to face him. What's that? That day on the highway, I was convinced my story was over, that I'd failed at everything important and would spend the rest of my life just ... existing, going through the motions. Now I realize I was at the beginning, the real beginning. Everything before was just the prelude. I kissed him softly. You saved me that day, not just from the heat and the highway, but from myself. From giving up? Hey. He tilted my chin up, his eyes serious. You saved yourself. You're the one who had the courage to leave, to start over, to take a chance on this weird little town and an overager sheriff who couldn't stop thinking about you. All I did was offer a ride. Best ride of my life, I teased. And he laughed, the sound filling our kitchen with warmth. I love you. Jamie Collins, he said, and even though he'd said it dozens of times over the past months, it still made my heart skip. I love you too, Daniel Reeves. The doorbell rang, announcing the first arrivals for the party. As we moved to answer it together, I caught a glimpse of us in the hallway mirror. 2 men who'd found each other against all odds, who'd built something real and lasting from a chance encounter on a lonely highway. I was no longer running away. I was home, a year after that first meeting. Daniel proposed at Eagle Point, where we'd shared our first kiss. I said yes before he even finished asking. Chuck and his husband threw us an engagement party that somehow turned into half the town celebrating in the park. My parents came to the wedding, a small, perfect ceremony at sunset with our closest friends, and my mom cried when she saw how happy I was. We're still in Red Creek, still in that house surrounded by pine trees and mountain views. Elevation Creative is thriving, and I've never been more fulfilled professionally. Daniel still stops to help stranded travelers on Highway 89. Though he jokes that I'll always be his favorite rescue, sometimes I think about that version of me on the highway. Lost, scared, convinced the best parts of life were behind me. And I wish I could tell him that the truck he sees approaching isn't the end of his story, it's the beginning of his greatest adventure. Life has a funny way of surprising you when you least expect it. Sometimes the worst day of your life is actually the doorway to the best chapter. Sometimes home isn't a place you return to, it's a person you choose. And sometimes when you stop running long enough to let love find you, it arrives in the form of a small-town sheriff with kind eyes and a generous heart. My name is Jamie Collins Reeves, now. And this is the story of how I went from hitchhiking nowhere to finding everywhere. That mattered. This is the story of how love surprised me, and I wouldn't change a single moment.